It was a bright, sunny afternoon in Pinewood Estates. This was a small neighborhood where everybody thought they knew everybody. Kids played in the yards, dogs barked at squirrels, and the houses all looked neat and tidy. But then there was Jake Miller. He was the new guy who moved in just a few weeks ago. Jake was tall, quiet, and didn't talk much to anyone. Most days you'd find him in his driveway, working on his shiny black motorcycle. That bike was loud and big, and Jake loved it more than anything. The neighbors didn't know what to think of him. They'd stand on their porches or peek out their windows, whispering to each other. "Who is this guy?" they ask. "Where did he come from?" Some of them waved when he walked by, but Jake just nodded back and kept to himself. He wasn't rude or mean, he just liked being alone. The people in Pinewood Estates had something called an HOA. That's short for Homeowners Association. It's a group that makes rules for the neighborhood, like how tall your grass can grow or what color you can paint your house. Everyone in Pinewood was part of it, everyone except Jake. "Why doesn't he join the HOA like the rest of us?" the neighbors would say. They didn't get it. To them, Jake was strange. He didn't come to their meetings or their picnics. He didn't sign their papers or pay their fees. All he did was stay in his little house and fix up that motorcycle. The bike was loud when it roared to life, and it gleamed in the sun like a black mirror. Jake would smile when he worked on it, wiping off dirt with a rag or tightening a bolt. Now, to him, it wasn't just a bike, it was his treasure. It made him happy, like a best friend he could ride anywhere. But the HOA didn't like that motorcycle one bit. They thought it was a problem. "It's too loud," they complained at their meetings. "It's too big for our quiet streets." They didn't like how it rumbled through the neighborhood or how it took up space in Jake's driveway. To them, it didn't fit with their perfect little world. And Jake, they didn't like him much either. They thought he was just some weird guy who didn't belong. "He's a loner," they'd whisper. "He doesn't care about our rules." Jake heard the whispers, but he didn't let them bother him. He'd shrug and keep working on his bike. He didn't want to join their club or follow their silly rules. He liked his freedom. He liked doing things his own way. The HOA could grumble all they wanted. Jake wasn't going to change for them. That motorcycle was his pride, his joy. It was his escape from the world. When he rode it, the wind would rush past him and all his worries would fly away. It wasn't just a machine to him, it was special. The neighbors didn't know it yet, but Jake had a secret. It was a big one too. Something about him was hidden, like a surprise waiting to pop out of a box. They thought he was just a quiet guy with a loud bike, but there was more to Jake than that. A lot more. While they gossiped and stared, Jake went about his days calm and cool. He didn't argue with them or tell them off. He just kept his head down and worked on his motorcycle. But deep down, he knew something they didn't. And soon, that secret was going to shake up Pinewood Estates like a thunderstorm. Let's picture it: the sun shining bright, the grass green and neat, kids riding bikes down the street. Everything in Pinewood seemed normal until Jake showed up. He moved into that little house at the end of the road, the one with the big oak tree out front. The first day he got there, he rolled his motorcycle into the driveway and started unpacking. The neighbors watched from afar, curious but unsure. "He looks nice enough," some said, "but that bike, it's trouble," others muttered. They didn't know what to make of him, and that made them nervous. Jake didn't mind being the new guy. He was used to it. He'd lived in lots of places before and he never stayed long enough to make big friends. Pinewood Estates was just another stop for him, a place to rest for a while. He liked the quiet, at least when his motorcycle wasn't running. He'd sit on his porch sometimes, sipping a soda and watching the world go by. The neighbors would wave and he'd wave back, but that was it. He didn't go over to chat or borrow sugar. He didn't need to. Jake was happy with his own company and his bike. That motorcycle was something else. It wasn't like the little scooters the kids rode or the rusty bikes in some garages. It was big and strong, with a deep growl that echoed down the street. Jake had built it up himself, piece by piece. He'd spent hours, days, even making it just right. The black paint shone so bright you could see your face in it. The engine purred when he turned it on, like a lion waking up. To Jake, it was perfect. Every time he rode it, he felt free, like nothing could hold him back. But to the HOA, that bike was a monster. They had rules about everything, rules about noise, rules about parking, rules about how things should look, and Jake's motorcycle broke all of them. "It's too loud for our peaceful neighborhood," they'd say. "It doesn't belong here." They wrote letters and stuck them on his door. "Please join the HOA," the notes said. "Get rid of that bike." Jake read them, chuckled, and tossed them in the trash. He wasn't going to let a bunch of bossy neighbors tell him what to do. The HOA didn't stop there. They'd talk about Jake at their meetings, shaking their heads. "He's not one of us," they'd say. "He doesn't care about our community." They thought he was rude for ignoring them. They thought he was selfish for keeping that bike. But Jake didn't see it that way. He wasn't hurting anyone. He just wanted to live his life free and simple. The HOA couldn't understand that. To them, he was a puzzle they couldn't solve, and that made them mad. One day, a lady named Karen Walters knocked on Jake's door. She was the boss of the HOA, and everyone listened to her. She had short hair and a loud voice, and she always carried a clipboard. "Hi, Jake," she said, smiling too big. "We'd love for you to join the HOA. It's how we keep things nice around here." Jake leaned against his door, arms crossed. "No thanks," he said. "I'm good." Karen's smile faded. "Well, that motorcycle of yours, it's a problem," she said. "It's too noisy. You should think about selling it." Jake just looked at her. "I like my bike," he said. "It's staying." Karen walked away, her face red. She didn't like being told no. From that day on, she watched Jake even closer. She'd drive by his house, glaring at that motorcycle. She'd talk about him to the other neighbors, stirring them up. "He's trouble," she'd say. "We need to do something." The HOA started making plans, little whispers turning into big ideas. They didn't know it yet, but they were about to mess with the wrong guy. Jake knew they didn't like him. He could feel their stares, hear their grumbles, but he didn't care. He'd dealt with people like them before, people who thought they could push him around. He wasn't scared. He wasn't mad. He just kept doing his thing, polishing that bike until it sparkled. The neighbors thought they had him figured out. They thought he was just some guy who didn't fit in, but they were wrong. Jake had a secret, a big, juicy secret. And when it came out, it was going to flip Pinewood Estates upside down. So there he was, living his quiet life, while the HOA buzzed around him like angry bees. They thought they were in charge. They thought they could make him bend. But Jake wasn't bending, not for them, not for anyone. He had something up his sleeve, something they'd never guess. The sun kept shining, the kids kept playing, and Jake kept tinkering with his bike. Everything seemed normal, but normal was about to disappear. Something big was coming, and Pinewood Estates wasn't ready for it. What do you think Jake's secret could be? Can you imagine living next to someone like him? The neighbors didn't know it yet, but they were in for a shock. Jake wasn't just some guy with a loud bike. He was more, way more. and soon they'd all find out the truth. In Pinewood Estates, one person ruled over everyone, or at least she thought she did. Her name was Karen Walters, and she was the president of the HOA. That's the Homeowners Association, the group that made all the rules for the neighborhood. Karen was like a queen in her mind. She walked around with her clipboard hugged tight to her chest, telling people what to do. "Cut your grass," she'd yell. "Paint your mailbox," she'd demand. Her voice was loud and bossy, and she acted like the whole place belonged to her. Karen had short brown hair and a frown that never went away. She wore bright shirts and big glasses, and she loved being in charge. Everyone listened to her because they didn't want trouble. If you didn't follow her rules, she'd make your life hard. She'd knock on your door or leave notes telling you what you did wrong. Most people just nodded and did what she said. But then there was Jake Miller, the new guy with the shiny black motorcycle. Jake wasn't like the others, and that drove Karen crazy. One day, Karen marched right up to Jake's house. He was in his driveway, fixing his bike like always. The sun was shining and the motorcycle sparkled as he wiped it with a rag. Karen stopped in front of him, her clipboard ready. "Jake," she said, her voice sharp like a teacher scolding a kid. "You need to join the HOA. It's how we keep things nice around here." She tapped her pen on the clipboard, waiting for him to agree. But Jake didn't even look up. He kept working on his bike, calm and quiet. "I'll pass," he said, wiping oil off his hands with that rag. Karen blinked. She wasn't used to people saying no. Her face turned red like a tomato about to burst. "And that motorcycle," she snapped, pointing at it. "It's against the rules. It's too loud and too big. Get rid of it or we will." Her words were fast and angry like a barking dog. Jake finally looked at her. He smiled a little, not a big smile, just a tiny one. "I like my bike," he said. "It's staying." Then he went back to his work like she wasn't even there. Karen didn't know what to do. She stood there for a second, her mouth open. No one had ever talked to her like that. She huffed, turned around, and stomped off. Her shoes clicked hard on the pavement as she went. She muttered under her breath, talking to herself about Jake. "Who does he think he is?" she grumbled. "He can't ignore me." When she got back to her house, she told her friends, her posse, the people who always followed her around. "Jake, a problem," she said. "We need to fix this." From that day on, Karen was on a mission. She didn't like Jake, and she really didn't like that motorcycle. She started leaving notes on his door. They weren't nice notes like "have a good day." No, these were mean ones. "Join or else," one said in big, sloppy letters. "Your bike's a disgrace," said another. She stick them on his door with tape or shove them in his mailbox. Jake would come home, see the notes, and just shake his head. He didn't get mad or yell. He picked them up, read them, and toss them in the trash. Then he'd go right back to his bike, polishing it like nothing happened. But Karen wasn't done. She wasn't the kind of person who gave up easy. She'd drive by Jake's house in her little white car, staring at him through her big glasses. She'd watch him work on that bike, her lips pressed tight together. "He thinks he's so smart," she'd mutter. "We'll see about that." At the HOA meetings, she'd talk about Jake all the time. "He won't join us," she'd tell the neighbors. "He doesn't care about our rules." Some people nodded, agreeing with her. Others just listened, not sure what to think. Jake knew Karen was mad. He could see it in her face every time she passed by, but he didn't care. He wasn't scared of her or her notes or her clipboard. He liked his life the way it was, simple and free. That motorcycle was his favorite thing and no one was going to take it away. Not Karen, not the HOA, not anybody. He'd sit in his driveway, the sun warm on his back, and tinker with the engine. The bike would purr when he started it and he'd smile. It was his happy place, and he wasn't letting it go. Karen's posse started helping her. They'd whisper about Jake when they walked their dogs or watered their flowers. "He's so rude," they'd say. "That bike is awful." They'd leave more notes too, piling them up on his porch. One even said, "Move out if you won't follow the rules." Jake didn't budge. He kept doing his thing, cool as a cucumber. The notes went in the trash one after another. He wasn't going to fight with them, he didn't need to, but Karen, she was boiling inside. She hated losing, and Jake was making her feel like she wasn't the boss anymore. Soon, Karen came up with a plan. She didn't tell Jake about it. She didn't tell anyone outside her posse. It was a sneaky plan and it was going to get messy. She had enough of Jake saying no. She had enough of that loud motorcycle rumbling through her perfect neighborhood. "If he won't listen," she told her friends, "we'll make him listen." Her eyes were narrow and her voice was low. The posse nodded, ready to follow her lead. They didn't know it yet, but they were about to stir up trouble, big trouble. Jake didn't know what was coming. He just kept living his quiet life, working on his bike every day. The neighbors watched, some annoyed, some curious. The tension in Pinewood Estates was growing, like a balloon getting too full of air. Karen was ready to pop it, and Jake was in her way. She thought she could push him around, make him do what she wanted. But Jake wasn't the kind of guy to bend. He had his own strength, his own secret, and Karen was about to find out she picked the wrong fight. Things were getting hot in Pinewood. Karen's anger was like a fire spreading to her friends. Jake's calm was like water, keeping him steady. The notes kept coming, the stairs kept getting sharper, and the motorcycle kept shining. Something big was brewing. The neighborhood didn't feel so peaceful anymore. Karen had a plan and it was going to shake everything up. But Jake, he wasn't worried. He had something up his sleeve, something Karen couldn't see coming. Weeks passed in Pinewood Estates, and things got worse between Jake and the HOA. It was like a big, heavy cloud hanging over the neighborhood. Everyone could feel it. The air wasn't calm anymore. It was thick, like fog you could barely see through. People stopped smiling as much. They watched Jake and his shiny black motorcycle more than ever. Karen Walters, the HOA president, was getting madder every day. She didn't like that Jake ignored her rules, and she really didn't like that loud bike. The tension grew bigger and bigger, like a rubber band stretched too tight, ready to snap. One night, Jake came home late. It was dark outside, and the streetlights made little yellow pools on the road. His motorcycle gleamed as he rolled it into his driveway. The black paint sparkled, catching the light like a mirror. Jake was tired. He'd been out all day. He parked the bike, locked it with a big chain, and patted it like it was his pet. "Good night, buddy," he might have said, though no one heard him. Then he went inside his little house, shut the door, and turned off the lights. The neighborhood went quiet, just crickets chirping in the grass. But the next morning, something awful happened. Jake woke up, stepped outside, and froze. His motorcycle was gone, not just gone like really gone. Where it used to sit, there was nothing but a black, ugly scorch mark on the pavement. It looked like someone had set it on fire. The air smelled like burned rubber and smoke. Bits of ash fluttered around, all that was left of his precious bike. Jake stood there, staring at the spot. His hands balled into fists and his jaw got tight like he was biting down hard. but he didn't scream or cry. He just looked quiet and still like a statue. The neighbors saw it too. They peeked out from behind their curtains, their eyes wide. "What happened?" they whispered to each other. Kids on their way to school stopped and pointed. "Whoa, look at that," they said. Soon the whispers turned into guesses. "The HOA did it," some people said, keeping their voices low. "It's got to be them." Everyone knew Karen hated that motorcycle. She'd been complaining about it for weeks, calling it loud, calling it ugly, saying it didn't belong. Now it was gone, burned to a crisp, and people started to wonder. Karen didn't try to act surprised. Later that day, she walked around with her clipboard, her head held high. She had a little smirk on her face, a sneaky smile that said she was proud. At the next HOA meeting, she couldn't help herself. "Maybe now he'll learn," she told her friends, her voice loud enough for others to hear. Her posse nodded, smiling back. "Good riddance to that noisy thing," one of them said. They laughed like it was a big joke. They thought they'd won. They thought Jake would finally give up and follow their rules, or maybe even move away. But Jake wasn't like that. He didn't shout or throw a fit when he saw his bike was gone. He didn't run to Karen's house to yell at her. He just stood there in his driveway looking at the ashes. His face was hard, but his eyes were sharp, like he was thinking hard about something. The neighbors watched, waiting for him to do something big. Would he cry? Would he get mad? No, Jake stayed calm, quieter than ever. Then he pulled out his phone from his pocket. He dialed a number, held it to his ear, and waited. When someone answered, he said just 3 words, "It's time." His voice was low, almost a whisper. Then he hung up and walked back inside. Time for what? The neighbors didn't know. They looked at each other, confused. "What's he talking about?" they asked. Who did he call? No one had answers, but it made them nervous. Jake wasn't acting like someone who'd just lost his favorite thing. He wasn't sad or scared. He was different, like he had a plan of his own. The whispers got louder. "He's up to something," one lady said, clutching her coffee cup. "I don't like this," said an old man watering his flowers. Something was coming, and they could feel it in their bones. Meanwhile, Karen kept acting like she was the queen of everything. She'd walk by Jake's house, glancing at the scorch mark with that same smirk. "Serves him right," she'd mutter. She thought she'd taught him a lesson. She thought she was in control. Her friends agreed, patting her on the back. No more noise, they cheered. No more trouble. They didn't care that the bike was gone. They were happy about it. To them, Jake was just a guy who didn't fit in, and now he'd been put in his place. Or so they thought. But Jake wasn't done. That phone call he made. It was a clue, a little hint that something big was about to happen. He didn't tell anyone what he was planning. He didn't need to. He just went back to his normal life, quiet as always. He'd sit on his porch, sipping a soda, watching the street. The neighbors kept spying, trying to figure him out. Why isn't he mad? They wondered. Why isn't he fighting back? Every day that passed, the mystery grew. Jake wasn't giving up. He was waiting. The tension in Pinewood Estates was thicker than ever. It was like a storm brewing, dark clouds piling up in the sky. Karen and her HOA crew thought they'd won the battle. They thought burning that motorcycle was the end of it, but they didn't know Jake. They didn't know what he was hiding. Every time he ignored their notes or smiled at their glares, he'd been holding something back. Now, with his bike gone, the game was changing. That scorch mark wasn't just ashes. It was a sign that things were about to get wild. Little by little, people started noticing things. Jake didn't act like someone who'd lost everything. He didn't pack up and leave. He didn't buy a new bike or beg for help. He just stayed calm and steady. "He's too quiet," one neighbor said. "It's creepy," said another. They didn't know what "it's time" meant, but it stuck in their heads. Jake's secret was still hidden, like a present waiting to be opened. And every day it got closer to coming out. Karen kept smirking, the neighbors kept whispering, and Jake kept waiting. The motorcycle was gone, but the story wasn't over. Something big was on the way, something that would shake up Pinewood Estates and turn everything upside down. What was Jake planning? Who did he call? The answers were coming, slow but sure, and when they hit, no one, not even Karen, would see it coming. A few days after Jake's motorcycle got burned, something huge was about to happen in Pinewood Estates. The HOA, the group that made all the neighborhood rules, had their big monthly meeting. It was held in the community center, a little building with white walls and lots of chairs. Everyone in the neighborhood showed up because they loved these meetings. They'd sit and listen to Karen Walters, the HOA president, talk about all the things she was doing to make the place better. This time, the room was packed. Every chair was taken, and some people even stood in the back. They wanted to hear Karen brag. She was good at that. Karen stood up front, holding her clipboard like it was a prize. She had a big smile on her face and her voice was loud and proud. "We're cleaning up the neighborhood," she said, looking around at everyone. "No more noise, no more mess. We took care of that motorcycle problem, didn't we?" She smirked, and her friends in the front row clapped. They all knew what she meant. Jake's bike was gone, burned to ashes, and Karen acted like it was her big win. The people in the room nodded and whispered to each other. Some smiled, happy the loud bike was history. Others just watched, waiting to see what she'd say next. Karen kept talking, waving her hands as she went. "Pinewood Estates is perfect now," she said. "We don't need people who won't follow our rules." She was so sure of herself, like a queen on a throne. Her posse, the group of friends who always followed her, cheered her on. "That's right, Karen," one of them shouted. The meeting felt like a party for her, and she loved every second of it. She didn't care that Jake's bike was gone. To her, it was proof she was in charge, and no one could stop her. But then something happened. The big double doors at the back of the community center flew open with a loud bang. Everyone turned to look. In walked Jake Miller. But he didn't look like the Jake they knew, the quiet guy who worked on his motorcycle and ignored their notes. This Jake was different. He wasn't wearing his usual jeans and old shirt. No, he had on a crisp black uniform that looked brand new. It was neat and shiny, with buttons that gleamed in the light. On his chest was a badge, a real metal badge that sparkled. And under his arm he carried a trooper hat, the kind police officers wear. He stood tall, his shoulders back and his face serious. The room went quiet, dead quiet. You could hear a pin drop. No one moved, no one whispered. They just stared at Jake, their eyes wide. Karen, up at the front, stopped talking mid-sentence. Her mouth fell open like she forgot how to close it. Her clipboard slipped a little in her hands, but she didn't notice. Everyone was looking at Jake, waiting. What was going on? Who was this guy? He didn't look like the loner they thought he was. He looked important. Jake stepped forward, his boots clicking on the floor. He stopped in the middle of the room and looked around. Then he spoke, and his voice was strong and steady, not shaky at all. "I'm State Trooper Jake Miller," he said. The words hit the room like a thunderclap. People gasped, their hands flying to their mouths. A state trooper, Jake, the guy with the motorcycle, no way. But there he was, standing right in front of them, wearing that uniform like he'd been hiding it all along. He kept talking, his eyes moving over the crowd. "I've been watching you all for weeks," he said. "I moved here to keep an eye on things, and that motorcycle you burned." He paused, letting the words sink in. "That wasn't just my bike, it was official police property." More gasps filled the air. People started whispering fast, turning to each other. "Police property," they said. "They burned a cop's bike." Karen's face went white, like all the color drained out of it. Her smirk was gone now, totally gone. Jake didn't stop. "You didn't just break your little HOA rules," he said, his voice getting louder. "You broke the law." That word law echoed in the room. It was a big deal. Breaking the law wasn't like forgetting to mow your lawn. It was serious, and everyone knew it. The neighbors looked at Karen, then back at Jake. Some of them scooted away from her, like they didn't want to be too close. Karen's posse stopped clapping. They looked scared now, their eyes darting around. Karen tried to say something. "We didn't know," she stammered, her voice all shaky. She held up her hands like she could stop what was happening. "We thought it was just a bike." But Jake didn't let her off easy. He took a step closer to her, his eyes locked on hers. "You should have asked," he said, slow and clear. His words were like a slap. Karen flinched, her clipboard dropping to the floor with a loud clack. She didn't pick it up. She just stood there, frozen, like a kid caught stealing cookies. The room buzzed with noise now. People couldn't believe it. Jake wasn't just some guy, he was a state trooper, a real police officer. All this time, he'd been living there, quiet and calm, while they whispered about him and hated his bike. And that bike, it wasn't just his toy, it belonged to the police. Burning it wasn't a little prank, it was a crime, a big one. The neighbors started talking all at once. "He's a cop," one lady said. "They're in trouble now," said a man in the back. Jake stood there, tall and strong, while everyone freaked out. He didn't smile or laugh, he just watched them, letting it all sink in. Karen's big moment was ruined. She'd been so proud, bragging about cleaning up the neighborhood. Now she looked small and silly. Her posse didn't know what to do. They stared at the floor, not meeting Jake's eyes. The whole meeting flipped upside down in seconds, all because Jake walked in and told the truth. This was it, the big reveal. Jake's secret was out, and it hit Pinewood Estates like a lightning bolt. He wasn't the weird loner they thought he was. He was a trooper, a guy with power they didn't expect. And Karen, she'd messed with the wrong person. Her plan to get rid of his bike had backfired big time. The room was alive with shock and whispers, but Jake stayed calm. He'd been waiting for this moment, and now it was here. What would happen next? Oh, it was only going to get better. The day after Jake's big reveal at the